Okay. Yeah, we're starting now. So much talking. We haven't started till this quiet. Okay. So I'm Gigi, and it was week 11. So I did look through a bunch of different verses, but God has other plans, so we'll just see where it all goes because it's in there. Anyway. We're going to be reading in John 13 and also in Luke, but
Did you say Luke 5?
also in Luke, but like that's later.
You said John 13.
Yeah, and Luke 22. I'm just making faces at people while they flip their pages. Okay. I'm Jean, by the way, in case I'm just like a brown blur up here. Okay.
Hi, Jane.
Hi. Okay. We're going to pray because I'm not usually nervous sharing, but like I didn't really feel like I could show you my notes right now and it's like that much because like God was like, we're just going to read and we're going to go. And I'm like, oh, okay. Thank you for that, Lord. Exactly. So anyway, we're going to pray because like I don't like being nervous. Anyway, God, thank you so much for tonight. Just help each one of us to get something really great out of this. We know you have something to share. No more nerves. And yeah, thank you for the pizza that was provided. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so tonight's title that was also come up with very like in haste. Anyway, was last words. It's not really in haste. It's just what, I don't know, God impressed upon me. So we're going to read John 13, then we're going to read some other verses, and then we're going to digest a little. And hopefully it won't take too long. Okay. Now, before the feast of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, he tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? And Jesus answered him, What I am doing, you do not understand now, but afterwards you will understand. And Peter said to him, You shall never wash my feet. And Jesus answered him, If I do not wash you, you have no share with me. And Simon said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. And Jesus said to him, The one who is bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you. For he knew who was to betray him. That was why he said, Not all of you are clean. When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, Do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought also to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you should do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. I am not speaking of all of you. I know whom I have chosen, but the scripture will be fulfilled. He who ate my bread has lifted his heel against me. I am telling you this now before it takes place, that when it does take place, you may believe that I am he. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever receives the one I send receives me, and whoever receives me receives the one who sent me. After saying these things, Jesus was troubled in his spirit and testified, Truly, truly, I say to you, one of you will betray me. The disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he spoke. One of his disciples, whom Jesus loved, was reclining at the table at Jesus' side. So Simon Peter motioned to him to ask Jesus of whom he was speaking. So that disciple, leaning back against Jesus, said to him, Lord, who is it? And Jesus answered, It is he to whom I will give this morsel of bread when I have dipped it. So when he had dipped the morsel, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. Then after he had taken the morsel, Satan entered into him, and Jesus said to him, What are you going to do? What you are going to do, do quickly. Now no one at the table knew why he had said this to him. Some thought that because Judas had the money bag, Jesus was telling him, Buy what we need for the feast, or that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the morsel of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. When he had gone out, Jesus said, Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and glorify him at once. Little children, yet a little while, I am with you. You will seek me, and just as I said to the Jews, so now I'm saying to you, where I am going, you cannot come. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, where are you going? And Jesus answered him, Where I'm going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow afterward. Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. And Jesus said, Will you lay down your life for me? Truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow till you have denied me 3 times.
Wow.
Okay. So, we're going to go back to the beginning, and we're going to digest. Because there was a lot of stuff that was in there, and there's a lot of different scripture that the little program thing Jason sent to me pointed out, and it was kind of like just following the story in each one of the Gospels, and so you can like notice what's not in one and what's in a lot in others. But when I went to read through them, I just was like, felt very strongly like I'm not supposed to be teaching on all of it, well, for one time, but also it's just like, this is specifically what God was like, no, this is what I'm supposed to be teaching on, and I was like, okay, because I thought it'd be fun to do something else, but this is cooler, actually. So in Luke 22, we're going to read in verse 24, but first I'm going to give a little context to this, because the only version of the Gospels that includes the foot washing is John's, but then there's other versions that only include other things. So if I read, I'm just going to kind of place this story where I think it happened here, because in other versions it just kind of goes straight to what Jesus said. But in Luke 22:24, first it says in John 13, Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Which I just think is like, super sobering right off the top, because it's like he already knew his hour had come, 33 years, and however many minutes and seconds and hours were like, that was it. That's where he was. And now his hour had come. Like, he's actually going to do the thing that he was born to do, like, that he came from heaven to do. And when his hour had come, he loved them to the end. And in verse 2 it says, During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him. There's a little pause here, okay? So, like, you're, like, about to die, this gruesome death. You already know it's about to happen. This is us just getting into the head of Jesus a little bit. But, like, this is something that's going on. There's, like, all this other spiritual stuff that's everywhere. And he's sitting here, like, he loves these people so much. But he's about to leave them because he has to do this thing, because he's got to go to work, whatever. And then in Luke 22, this is about when I figured out it would have jumped in. Verse 24 through 30, this dispute broke out. A dispute also arose among them as to which of them was to be regarded as the greatest. And he said to them, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and those in authority over them called benefactors. But not so with you. Rather, let the greatest among you become as the youngest, and the leader as one who serves. For who is greater, one who reclines at the table or the one who serves? It is not the one who reclines at the table, but I am among you as one who serves. You are those who have stayed with me in my trials, and I assign to you, as my Father assigned to me, a kingdom, that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom and sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So a dispute broke out. All of a sudden, they're talking about, who's the greatest disciple. I don't know, whoever they're talking about, who's the greatest, in the kingdom. Obviously, it's God, but, they're just talking about which one of them is the best. And at this point, I don't know, I just think it's really neat because at this point, Jesus is sitting here contemplating his, upcoming death. It's about to happen. And this is the Last Supper. This is actually it. And he's sitting here, and then all of a sudden they start this whole debate. And I was talking to Jordan earlier today, so I leaked some information. But I don't know. God just showed me it was really interesting that there's a lot of things that were not recorded in the Bible. I've heard it said that 10% of Jesus' whole life makes up our entire Bible, basically. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, that's crazy when you think about it. But he's 33 years old, whatever. And you're not, this is the whole Bible. But we don't have his whole life. We just have this little fragment of 3 years. And it's not even that detailed of a 3 years. It's what we have. And there's 4 different Gospels. And these people sat down and painstakingly wrote out all these things that Jesus said and tried to remember all these different things. And only one of the Gospels talks about foot washing. But if you look, this is really funny to me, is that they don't all talk about the little argument that broke out during the Last Supper either, which I just think is interesting because we just kind of drop information, I guess. I don't know if they just didn't remember that they had that argument or if they were chill, just that we don't need to talk about that. I don't know, but it's really interesting because they all of a sudden are talking about who's the greatest. And then in verse 3 of John 13, because I'm assuming this is all taking place around the same time, because if you line up the scriptures, that's kind of what I came to anyway. In verse 3 it says, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, he rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, he tied it around his waist. And then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Okay, so everyone's sitting here arguing about who's the greatest and, baddest, best, whatever. And Jesus is sitting here just I came from the Father, I'm going back to the Father. He's having this whole existential existence moment, and we're all just sitting here bickering about who's best, who knows more, whatever. I don't know, we get into that really easily. We talk about theology and doctrine and what practice is best and why is this the way it is and why is that the way it is. But we get into these little moments, and when you think about it, how much of it, at least for me, I felt super convicted, how much of it is just my pride basically saying what thought process is better than the next person's thought process. And it's God's thought process is about eternity and salvation and all this stuff. And I'm sitting here thinking about, I don't know, whatever it is that I think is most important. And there's Jesus in the midst of it. And he's listen, okay, the servant is the greatest. But while he's doing that, if you can just picture it, because I could be taking it out of context, but if you could just picture it, he's getting up and wrapping a towel around his waist and getting this basin of water out and being okay, time to wash some feet. Clearly everyone's all in their own head. It's time to do some ministry. It's time to do something, not just sit here and talk about ourselves. When he came to Simon Peter, he said, Lord, do you wash my feet? And he's like, what I'm doing to you now, you will not understand, but afterwards you will. And, you're not going to have a share with me if you don't let me be a servant to you. And Peter, like, right away, he's like, all right, whole body, let's go, like, cleansing, because that's Peter, right? And I don't care if other people don't think Jesus could occasionally be sarcastic, but I just think it's really funny that his next thing to him was like, the one who bathed does not need to wash. Like, you're good. I'm not going to wash your whole body. It's okay. It's just your feet. And then he like immediately takes it back to a serious note and is like, but not all of you are clean. Like, not everyone here is like pure and above whatever. And this is before Judas had actually like done it. But in the other versions, I think it's in Mark, it says that Judas, from the moment he received the money, like it actually says, from the moment he was then set to look for an opportunity to betray Jesus. So he'd already, like in his heart, sin's done, like he's already sold him out. And meanwhile, like, he's washing everybody's feet. He didn't like, let me just skip you, because like, yeah, your feet betrayed me swiftly. Like, you were very set to do that. You still, like, you're sitting here, I'm washing your feet, and I don't know, God's washing your feet, and you're looking down at him, and it's like, you've already gotten your money, you're trying to figure out a good time to do this. I don't know, maybe you're feeling a little guilty. I don't know. But, like, that's going on while Jesus is washing your feet. And, like, the part about that like, really spoke to me was it's not even about Judas, because I thought for a little bit that maybe I was supposed to do this whole thing on Judas, and I was like, oh, that'll be interesting. But about Jesus, like, he's compassionately sitting here washing your feet, and it doesn't really matter. It's like, you're going to ditch me, you're going to ditch me, you're going to ditch me, you're actually kind of low-key killing me. You're going to deny me and not even care, like, in the immediate moment. You're going to cuss this little kid out, whatever. Like, but I'm washing every one of your feet anyway. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, he's trying to love and just, like, I'm just trying to love you. Because it said, like, right in the beginning, he loved them to the end. Like, he just is trying to love you. It doesn't matter. You're running away. You don't care. You're not listening. You're betraying him in your heart before you've even physically done it. But, like, he's just washing your feet because he's like, I still love you. You're still mine. And then it says in verse 12, when he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments. Okay, so with that being said, I like mentally picture Jesus like taking off, like rolling up the sleeves. He's going to get dirty and do this. So now he's like getting back, kosher, whatever. And he resumed his place. He went back to his seat and all that. He said, do you understand what I've done to you? And everyone's just sitting there all clean, squeaky, like, no, but we felt super awkward, like, I'm sure. And he says, you call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If then your Lord and teacher have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. And if you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. Like, okay, so in light of the concept of Jesus just already like low-key scolding everybody for sitting around trying to decide who's the best and who has the best thought process and who's the whatever greatest, like, I would feel pretty humbled sitting here listening to that, because I'd be like, he's talking to me. Like, there's no way around it. He's okay, I get it, God. Like, you washed my feet, and now I see that I've been, like, the greatest of sinners. But he's not even saying it, like, in a harsh way. He's literally just, because Jesus is so gentle, he's just sitting here like, listen, I just did this and showed it to you, because, like, he's had to deal with these people so much. And you think about all the things, like I said before, that haven't been recorded in the Bible. The fact that someone decided that it was worth the time to write down that they were having another dispute about who's the greatest, it kind of speaks to the concept that this was a regular occurrence, if that makes sense. Like, it happened more than once. It happened regularly enough that someone actually was like, okay, we probably should admit to this little thing we used to do. But, like, it wasn't like he, like, got up and was like, you guys are insane. I don't understand. Like, I'm the greatest. Is that not clear? Like, I'm the greatest. Stop. Because he's Jesus. He could have said that really easily. But instead, he's just like, I don't know. I don't know if he was like sighing or like long-sufferingly, like begrudgingly putting this towel around his waist. He's like, I love you. let me show you how you're supposed to behave, because Jesus is like king of like good conduct. He's like, this is bad. I'm going to show you what's good, okay? And blessed are you if you do them. Like, you see it. I've shown it to you. I've been showing it to you. Blessed are you if you do them. And then he talks about the one who had betrayed him. And I don't know. I thought it was really like interesting that he like went from like he was explaining it and explaining the whole thing about who's the greatest and all of that, and then all of a sudden he's just like, he's troubled in his spirit. Like, I don't know. I liked the word disturbed. I don't remember which version I read. It wasn't ESV, but one of them used the word disturbed, and I just thought that was like super, I don't know, just cutting. Like, he was just sitting there like, he's troubled in his spirit, and so he testifies about what's about to happen. Also because he's speaking super plainly. Like, there's more. Like, if you go on to read chapter 14 and 15 and 16, he talks about how like he's speaking plainly now. He's telling them everything that God told him. And so it's like, these are not just the words of God because they're from Jesus. This is like, you're getting insight into the communication between like the Trinity now. Like, he's telling them everything at this point because this is like his last dinner. That's why it's the Last Supper. Like, these are some of his last words that he says to his disciples in an intimate setting. It's got to be intimate because it already explained that he had disrobed and then put more clothing back on. So there wasn't like 700 people in this big gathering hall. It was pretty intimate at this point. And then he like serves Judas, which, I mean, you could have just been like, he was just trying to mark him out, like, here, take this food so I can tell everybody it was you. Like, he didn't stand up and go, by the way, traitor. Like, he's like serving him still, even in that moment. Like, he dipped the morsel of bread, whatever, piece of bread, and hands the flapjack to Brandon and is like, here you go. Like, I still love you. And I don't know. I just think about that because, like, every blessing we ever experience in life is God being like, I love you. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's him saying, I still love you. Because sometimes we're sitting there like deep in our own self pool of sin, whatever. And God's like, here's a blessing. And we're like, oh man, it's great. I found $20 in the street. He still loves you. This person cut me off, but I didn't die. Oh my gosh, thank God. Like, I still love you. Like, really, really, really simple stuff. Like, he's saying, I still love you, even as far as Judas had already gone, which was, I don't know, I've definitely talked to people who are like, they would want to meet Paul, they'd want to meet Peter, they'd want to meet Jesus. Like, if they could go back in time and meet anybody, like, I always think it'd be really neat to meet Judas. Not because I just think he's this great hero of faith, obviously, but like, because I don't know, I would want to know, like, was that so similar to the way we can be? Like, where we're just like, we're so set in our sin and where we're at, that like, when Jesus is like, he's washing your feet, he's feeding you, he's like sitting there at table with you at a feast being like, I love you, I still love you, I have this deep, unquenchable love for you, and I'm about to do everything for you, that we can sit there and be like, oh well, like I already have the money, so I gotta do it. I don't know. Yeah.
In those verses about Jesus saying the one who I give this to is the one who's betraying me.
Mm-hmm.
It made it seem like he was saying that in front of everybody, and everybody heard. And then he gave it to just Judas. So why wouldn't they notice that he just gave it to Judas? So now he's the traitor.
I got the impression from the person who was like leaning his back against Jesus that it was like a whispered thing, if that makes sense. Like, he leaned into Jesus to hear it, if that makes sense.
Well, who did that?
That's John. Yeah.
And so John knew who it was? So John knew that Judas was the traitor?
Yeah.
But none of the other disciples?
I mean, they all knew by the end, but yeah. Yeah. Which I think that just talks about like, I don't want to say trust levels, because I don't really know what was the thought process in telling one but not the others, but I imagine that some of the others, maybe Peter, wouldn't have been the nicest if he had figured out what was going on.
Like, how dare you?
Yeah, basically. He wasn't interested in an accusation party.
Yeah.
Like he was answering a question for that one person, but he wasn't like trying to like name him because I don't know. He still loved him. I just think that's really neat. And I think it's interesting that Jesus like directly addresses Judas only after Satan entered into him. In verse 27, it says, "Then after he had taken the morsel from, Jesus, Satan entered into him, and Jesus said to him," not clarifying who he's talking to, but whatever. I like to think he's just like, he sees what happened, and he's like, he still had that, like, I don't know, just like that compassion, like, okay, go do it. Like, whatever you came to do it quickly. But I also just think, like, Band-Aids, we like to rip them off fast and get it over with. So I kind of, like, in my heart feel like maybe it was just like it's done. Like, it's done. Satan's entered into you. You are designed for this. You're destined for this now. Go forth and do it quick because, like, do it quickly before I, like, hug you. Like, go. I don't know. Because I just picture, like, good hug from Jesus probably could have fixed it, but, like, I don't know. That's just me, though. And no one at the table knew what he was talking about at that point, so they all just kind of assumed things, whatever, about the money bag or getting more food for the feast. And he immediately went out, and it was night. So then Jesus turns to the disciples that are left, which are the disciples he knows were going to be left, even though, again, he's also very aware, looking around the room, that it's like, you're going to be left, but you're going to leave first, and then you're going to come back, but it's okay, like, because I still love you. And he tells them a new commandment, which is the little title for this little part. But in verse 31 of John 13, it says, "When he had gone out, Judas, Jesus said, 'Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him.'" And it's like, I don't know. I just think that's like so beautiful. Like God was like, and now that the traitor has left and like he's gone to do his thing, now God is being glorified, even in this like horrible, wretched sin that no one can imagine, like actually betraying the Son of God. Like he's leaving, he's going to do this, and now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is being glorified in him.
Why is he being glorified?
There's verses behind me. Oh, sorry.
Why is he being glorified by Judas going to betray him? Why is that making Jesus be glorified by God? Or is God is glorifying? Yeah, God's glorifying Jesus. Why at that time? About just because Judas left.
Because Judas had gone to like arrange for the betrayal to happen,
Yeah.
but also because, or my opinion, anybody can jump in. Also because I think like any time that God's purpose is like being done, like those are times that God is glorified. Like if we're trying to avoid what God wants done, like those are times that we're dismissing God. We're saying, never mind God, my will, not yours. Jesus was like accepting God's will.
What does it mean that he was glorified? What does it mean by that?
Anybody want to give an answer?
What's the question one more time?
What does it mean that Jesus was glorified?
Like what does that mean? Like the glorified, like how was he glorified and what?
Praising.
So now the Son of Man is glorified and God is glorified in him. So I was listening as I'm looking it up. Zechariah 11:13, and then Jeremiah chapter 19 and Jeremiah 32 also talk about the 30. He would be sold for 30 pieces of silver. I don't have it right in front of me exactly what it says. And so it's prophecy being fulfilled. The prophecy is fulfilled. God is glorified because it's a proof. It's something you can look to and go, And so Jesus is going to be glorified because people will be able to look and go, oh, this is prophecy being fulfilled. He's on his way to the cross for the ultimate, to be glorified. But he is going to be lifting God up the whole way through, and therefore people will be lifting up God.
And what does glorified mean?
The Google definition is represented in such a way as to be elevated or special.
That's what the word means.
They got elevated.
Okay. Did you actually?
I went around all that and I missed that question.
We all just let you. It's fine.
Thank y'all.
Okay. Does anybody else have questions? Okay, I'm gonna keep talking. Okay. So Jesus is now talking. It's now the actual inner circle. Like it's not just the inner circle plus one. It's like this is it. This is just the 11 now. And God is glorified in him. If this is verse 32, if God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and glorify him at once. Little children, yet a little while I am with you. You will seek me, and just as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So, this is like the highlighted section. This is like the big thing to me in the whole chapter. There was a lot of stuff in the whole chapter, but we're not quite at the end of it. But when he addresses them as little children, like, okay, so think about like if you had kids. Some of you do have kids. You have children, and deep down, or even if you have siblings. Everyone has siblings, okay, so it doesn't matter. Whatever. But deep down, you know that at some point your parents aren't going to be there anymore. Like, they just won't. And I don't know, like you kind of, if you've ever heard your mom say this, I don't know, my mom used to say it, like she really wanted us all to get along, 'cause someday they wouldn't be there anymore, and she didn't want us to be alone. And I don't know, if that's how a parent would feel, that's how an earthly parent would feel, that's messed up and had all kinds of problems and stuff like that. They just don't want you to be alone. You have other siblings, like, come on. Or that's how you felt toward your children. And we're earthly. Like, how much more is Jesus sitting here like, listen, in a little bit, I'm going to go. And, like, I want you to love each other. Like, he's not just sitting there being like, okay, a new commandment, everybody love each other. It's great, I'm a hippie, whatever. Like, he's not. He's literally being like, I'm giving you a command before I go. Again, they were all just sitting there arguing a second ago. Like, that you love one another just as I have loved you. Wherever you were, whatever you were doing, wherever I called you from, whatever your circumstance was in that moment, however much you irritated me, woke me up with your questions in the middle of the night, like, because I'm sure Jesus dealt with that. Like, I love you. And I want you to, like, turn around, look at your brother, and love them. Because that is, like, I don't know, like, to me, that is just so beautiful. Because those were, like, these are kind of like his parting words to them. Like, this is, like, I don't know. If you were on your deathbed, and you could talk to one person, and you could just say one thing to them, we'd all each have something different that we'd probably want to say. But, like, if you knew you were dying, like, I like to think that the most important thing is the thing that would come out of your mouth. Maybe a joke would be important to you, I don't know. But, like, it's the most important thing. And so he's saying, this is a new commandment. But then it's like, it's that same commandment that he was talking about, like, to love God and to love others. And that's just as equal as the first. It's just as important to love each other in the body of Christ as it is to love God. And if we're not doing both of them, then we kind of are in error, and that's just all there is to it. But I'm giving you a new commandment, as if we haven't said it already, just in case anyone missed it. Love each other as I've loved you, because by this all people are going to know that you are my disciples if you love one another. And like that, it's a whole different portion in my brain, because then it's just like, it goes from just like taking care of each other to like, and just in case you wondered, like when you don't love each other, it will always stand out to the world. Like when you hear people talking bad about Christians, that is like one of those top things, is all that church hurt, all those times that Christians just failed to hit the mark. They didn't care enough to try. I can be like kind of a blunt person, so I'm one of those people who like tends to hurt feelings without realizing it. And then if you're one of those people who gets your feelings hurt and doesn't want to talk about it, I may never know. So then like, man, then that creates this hurt. And it's not that the church is sitting around trying, the bride of Christ is not trying to hurt people. But if we're not following this commandment that's like as great as the first, or, as Jesus said here, the new commandment to love one another, like it's so easy for us to slip away from that. And it was like, God knew all of that. Jesus knew all of that. And he's like, I'm dying. I basically have cancer right now. He just left, but the tumor's coming back. So like, I'm dying. And I need to tell you as like some of my parting words to love each other, because it's so important that you care for each other. And if you don't care for each other, then people are also going to be like, yeah, they're not really there. Because if you love me, you're going to love each other. Do you have a question? I keep seeing your finger. Okay.
I was kind of learning that a little bit. Just like loving people unconditionally. Like I was really mad at somebody because they did something, and I just did not want to be around them or nothing to do with them. But like, what's the most Christ-like thing I could do right now? And that was just to love them.
It's like, why? Why is that there? Yeah.
This is blowing my mind, the sibling thing, because I never thought of the disciples like siblings. I don't have siblings, but I know, I have kids and they're siblings. So when you're saying as the parent, it's like you think, it's almost like when he's saying love one another, like if I was dying, I would tell my kids, like, you're going to have to cling to each other because you're really going to need each other. And then when you say how the world looks at the church, did you ever meet somebody that doesn't speak to their siblings? And it's like you're estranged from your brother or your sister. But me, because I don't have siblings, I'll be like, but wait, isn't that your sister? Like, what do you mean you don't speak? Or that's your brother you haven't talked in 20 years. Like, how can that be?
Yeah.
So when you're saying how the world looks at the church and you're describing the disciples as siblings, that's probably why they're like, how can that be? Like, how can they have so much beef with each other all the time? Aren't they siblings?
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. That's really good. I learned stuff.
Okay.
It's really good.
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything? Okay. I might have an answer.
In the part where it says that you can't come where I'm going, is he talking about he's going to die or he's going to heaven? Where is the place he's going to that they can't go?
I think he's talking about that his oncoming crucifixion. Because then if we keep reading, which I wasn't going to because that's kind of the end of what I have. But if you keep reading, like the rest, those last little few verses, Peter pretty quickly, good old Peter, is like, I'm going to go wherever you're going to go. And he's like, you can't follow me right now, but you will. And it's like, I don't know. I've actually heard people say that when he said, basically telling Peter that, but he would follow him eventually, was like him foreshadowing that Peter was going to die on a cross as well. But I don't know if that's actually what he meant by that. That's just what I've heard people say. I'm just regurgitating something. I don't know. Does that answer it?
Yeah.
Yay. Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts? Because this kind of like was really, I don't know, it's really cool to me. I almost cried. Almost got me. But anyway, did anybody else have anything they wanted to say? Or share comments, complaints, questions?
Why did Judas betray Jesus? Like, why didn't Jesus or someone do something? Like
To stop him, you mean?
yeah, I know Jesus had to die, but what happened to Judas after?
After?
Yeah, what happened after this with Judas?
So after he betrayed Jesus, was it after he was crucified or during?
I think
Well,
during.
I don't know the timeline.
I don't really know what the
Seems
time
He tried
was.
to give the money back and then
Yeah.
hung himself in a tree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I heard
He
that.
killed himself before Jesus was
Crucified.
Like he tried to give the money back, and I don't know. I've heard a lot of theories about that like maybe he thought it was just going to be like a quick deal. Yeah, like maybe he'd make the deal and they would beat Jesus or something, but they weren't going to kill him, and so that's why he had so much more regret. I think once Satan was like, okay, I'm done with you. You're done being my tool. I personally think he all of a sudden was just overwhelmed with the regret of his decision. Because it's funny how, yeah, go ahead.
It's like part of it, this is always the most difficult stuff in scripture because it's like part of it was his decision,
Mm-hmm.
but then it's like part of it wasn't, because with your question, like Jason was saying, it's a fulfillment from the Old Testament, because verse 18 says, I know whom I have chosen, but the scripture will be fulfilled. There wasn't, Jesus would have never been like, let me go stop him. That would have been against the Father's will, because it had to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just so weird. That's just
Yeah.
the hardest thing to understand.
Would he have gone to, did Judas go to heaven? Because did he ask for forgiveness? Or did he?
It doesn't record it. The disciples talked about that. What happened to Judas when Jesus, surprise, rose from the dead? The disciples did question Jesus a little bit about that, and he basically told them that it wasn't their business. But
Huh?
There you go.
someone have it Googled.
You know, so that,
Perdition.
remember, because he's called the son of perdition.
State of eternal punishment and damnation into which a sinful and unpenitent person passes after death.
So Judas was called the son of perdition, and it says a state of eternal. No, I could still read it. I'm not old. Perdition means a state of eternal. Perdition means a state of eternal punishment and damnation into which a sinful and unpenitent or unrepentant person passes after death. Another thing about him like killing himself, that wasn't like he was sorry he had done it, but it's like that's an escape thing. That's not really like facing what you did. Like maybe facing what he had done would have been going and talking to the disciples or actually trying to make something right. But I feel like at that point he was like so far gone that and kind of sounds really harsh when you say it, but if you're allowing Satan to use you as a tool, pretty much anybody, think about like Hollywood or anybody who lets Satan just like use them for whatever he wants. You're just a tool to him. He's not God. So you are just a tool to him. And when he's done, what do you do with a rag? What do you do with the tissue? You throw it away. Like you're just done with that. So it's not really like he had done this, thing. And now he's like, okay, I'm going to like go back and live a normal life. He had done this horrific thing. He like felt like he had killed the Son of God. And Satan's not sitting there comforting him afterwards, patting him on the head, telling him what a good job he did. He just left him. So, yeah, then he killed himself. And according to Jason, he went to hell.
I got you another scripture. That's where Jesus refers to him as son of perdition.
Okay, in John 17:12, he called him the son of perdition.
Is that when the disciples were asking Jesus what happened to him? I never heard of that one.
No. I thought that was in John.
17:12 says about the
But
son of perdition.
maybe not. This is why Google's a thing, guys.
Okay, so this is the one where Jesus is praying the priestly prayer, right? It says, with them I kept them in your name that you have given me, I have guarded them, and not one of them has been lost except the son of destruction, the son of perdition, that the scripture might be fulfilled. The only one that Jesus lost was Judas, and that's because Judas made his own decision.
Yeah. But he didn't lose him like he had walked away. Yeah. I'm so close. 21,
That's where
22.
they ask him? Yeah. Well, Peter does.
So 21, you said 22? Okay, 20. It says, Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, the one who also had leaned back against him during the supper, and said, Lord, who is it that is going to betray you? And Peter saw him. He said to Jesus, Lord, what about this man? And Jesus said to him, if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is it to you? You follow me.
Where was that at?
That was John 21:20.
21:20.
Is it a sin to kill yourself? I've heard of that from another, like, person. Like, is it a sin?
What-
I'm so serious.
Definitely a sin, but
I think it's a sin, but I wouldn't try it and find out what happens. That's just that's my opinion of it.
where was it you was talking about earlier about, one version said it disturbing.
Disturbing. I don't know which.
You
Where was
earlier
that?
you was- Yeah, where was you? I was trying to find.
Oh,
it
it's in 13.
John 13.
21. Jesus was troubled in his spirit, but I don't know which version of.
Well, I was looking, I got four
Oh,
of them right here.
Okay.
So I wanted to know.
Okay, I don't know which version says the word disturbing, but okay. Anybody else have any deep diving studies questions? Rewind. Go read John 13. Enjoy yourself. Okay.
Well, in the message it says upset, which
Upset.
I don't really like. The message.
Jesus was kind of upset.
Yeah, I didn't find out that message wasn't so perpendicular to the actual Bible until after I bought one, so.
Which verse was that had the disturbed or?
It doesn't use the word disturbed in my Bible because it's an ESV. I don't know which version uses the word disturbed.
Which
I
verse
think
is
it's,
It's 21 and 13. John 13, 21.
And that he was deeply troubled.
yeah, that's.
Sounds good too. We can close out if nobody has any questions pertinent to the word. Okay. God, thank you for everything that you say and you do. God, thank you for giving us each other. Help us to take care of each other like you would want us to take care of each other, like you take care of us. I just pray that everybody would get home safe and have a good night. And God, just help us to ponder your word in the future days. In Jesus' name, amen. Got the cameras, got the cameras.